Thank you, everyone, for listening to Soul Talk with host Jeremy McDonald, the author of Peace Be Still. You can check out more about our shows or about Jeremy at soultalkradio.org and jeremymcdonald.net. And now for our show.
Hello, and thank you, everybody, for listening to Soul Talk. This is our first show in a couple weeks. I took a few weeks off, and I'm glad I did because we got a great guest this morning. Tari Prinster is calling in, and we're looking forward to having a great conversation about her topic this morning, Yoga for Cancer, and we're going to be discussing her work as well as her book, Yoga for Cancer, a guide for managing side effects, boosting immunity, and improving recovery for cancer survivors. Good morning, Tari. How are you?
Good morning, Jeremy. I'm wonderful. Thank you for having me on your show here this morning.
It's wonderful to have you, and I'm glad that we connected here for a few minutes beforehand, and I'm sure we're going to have a great time. So I think I wanted to start off with just talking a little bit about where you came from. I think to me that's always a great place to start off. And it seems to me, based on what I've read in your book and through your bio and stuff, that you actually are a cancer survivor yourself. And,
indeed, I am. I am a cancer survivor now for close to 15 years. So I have been around a long time since I heard those three little words that nobody wants to hear. You have cancer.
Yeah. Wow.
And I have used my time since then, since I heard those three little words, to both keep myself healthy and strong and to discover ways to do that I can share with others, currently through my book. But over the past 10 years, I have been teaching yoga to cancer survivors all over the country. And it has become my mission, my mantra, my journey, and my delight.
Wow. So what got you, obviously those three words are very strong, and I've actually talked quite a bit with other people about, that moment where you hear you have cancer or you got cancer, and, my mother actually passed away from uterine cancer, so it's kind of a topic for me as well. What goes, I know it'll go through some people's mind. What went through your mind at that moment, and, to take you to going to yoga and everything else and going from there? What went through your mind at that moment?
That I said, how could this be happening to me? I did everything right. This isn't supposed to happen to me.
Right.
I'm feeling strong. I look strong. I was, of course, 15 years younger, which meant that I was in my mid-50s, and it was not a time in my life when I expected to hear that, because I was feeling good and had a wonderful career, and my family was grown and off, and life seemed good, that I was on my way to enjoying the rest of the part of your life that you work so hard to enjoy once you raise a family. And I have never had a history of any kind of illness. I'd always been very athletic, quite trim in my weight management. I ate healthy. I was never a smoker. So it was kind of like, this isn't happening to me. It's not supposed to. And then it sort of was then, as I say to my students, my yoga students now, the second thing I felt was I stopped breathing and realized it was happening to me. And even though all of these other things were going in my direction, it can happen to anyone at any time. There's not a profile for someone who gets touched by cancer. It can happen, and it did. So I had to stop, catch my breath, which I had lost, and think about a plan. which was to get treatments. I followed the Western model of care, of treatment for the cancer. It was breast cancer, and I immediately went to all of the research on what this treatment versus that treatment, and talked to my doctors, and then I got a second opinion, compared all of the different treatment routes, and decided to go the Western model, which was for me a series of lumpectomies for my breast cancer, and then almost 10 months of chemotherapy, and followed by a regimen of radiation treatments. And so 15 years later, I'm here, and I guess that worked.
It worked out.
At least for that particular cancer. And then we're left with as survivors, once you go through all of those treatment decisions and then the treatments themselves, it was close to a year and a half of being in that situation. Then you do all your follow-ups and constantly monitoring yourself and your feelings for a recurrence, or not just that cancer, looking for signs of other kinds of cancers. So hearing those three little words puts you into cancer land for sure. That changes your thinking entirely as to what this means in one's life for the rest of your life. So that's a little bit of my path and my journey. And I would, just like to say that where I was 15 years ago, the world of cancer was quite different than what it is today. In 15 years, we have heard a lot more about cancer. We are, in fact, I seriously doubt if there is a newspaper published anywhere in the world that does not have cancer or something about cancer and cancer research in it every day now. Even 15 years ago, cancer was one of those things that was not spoken about often. I'm not sure when your mother passed away or what that meant to you and your family, but there were times not too long ago where patients were not even told they had cancer. It was talked about with the family, but it became sort of a stigmatized, in the closet kind of disease that people did not like to talk about. Now we seem to talk about it quite openly and freely, and our awareness of it is far broader than what it was 15 years ago. In fact, I would think that most people now would be able to answer the question, do more people die of cancer or survive cancer? 15 years ago, what it meant to me was that more people died of cancer than survived it. And we certainly know today that more people survive cancer than die of cancer. The world of cancer survivors is fortunately growing every year. And I think that that's one of the really big shifts from the moment that I heard those three little words into what is happening today in people's mind when they hear that someone has been diagnosed with cancer. It's a little bit less alarming. Not to say that we have found any cure, we certainly have not, but we've also gained some perspectives on whether we should be looking for a cure or looking for ways to manage the risk factors of cancer. Yeah. So I've been talking a lot here, Jeremy. Let me let you get in.
the show is about you, so that's okay. you and your work and helping other people. So, and to answer your question, it was 2012, and it's interesting because both of us looked at each other, and she was a registered nurse of 30 years and a Qigong practitioner. So, so in our mind, we were like, we were very into holistic medicine and holistic type of ways of treating things. So we didn't think she was ever going to, we thought she was going to, survive it. And it was, the interesting part about that is that we both really, even though we didn't want her to pass away, we had a very sense of calmness about us. So it wasn't that stigma where we automatically went into panic mode. We started thinking about, well, what are we going to do for you to survive? And so, obviously we went through our emotions, but it just wasn't, it was different than what I had heard other families go through as they were going through that process. But mine came from 15 years ago. My stories of what families went through. Exactly, I think you're probably very right, because I don't remember people talking about if they got cancer, or if they did, they told only their close circle, and then they didn't want anybody else to know. And that's interesting. I never thought about that.
Yeah,
so.
and a lot of that feeling, or the way we handled cancer 15 years ago and longer, it comes out of a naive understanding of what cancer is, where it comes from, and also that by a certain degree that it's something that, and this is where my first reaction was, no, this can't be happening to me. I did everything right. That cancer is something that we get because we did something wrong, or that it's something that we could have avoided had we, done this, that, or the other. There was a lot of blame attached to cancer, partly because we didn't understand it, and I think we're getting a better understanding. I should say clear. We've got a long way to go to be clear about it, but a better understanding what cancer is than we did, say, 15 years ago. At least in terms of it's not something that is smoking cigarettes, we know, is one of those risk factors that is clearly linked to causing lung cancer. But there are many people who are diagnosed with lung cancer who never smoke. So what we're looking at is such a mystery here of what the causal effects of cancer are, and what I'm seeing and hoping and feeling that we are moving away from the causal effects being something that a person has done wrong, and shifting that to more, hey, look, we're all exposed to carcinogens and risk-causing factors in our environment and in our modern life. What can we do? What can we do individually and collectively to avoid those risk factors? For example, yesterday in the New York Times, an article on the PCBs that Monsanto has been supposedly putting into the environment over the past, I don't know how long, but from the beginning, I would guess, that what we are looking at is ways of working together to control the kinds of known cancer-causing agents in the world, and producing such things as plastics that are not carcinogens. And this is a way that we can, avoid and protect ourselves. Whether or not we're going to ever, be cancer-free as human beings is a whole other topic as to whether or not our DNA might just be programmed to have this default in us, where random occurrences of a cancer happen. Learning to live with that is on the other side of how we go forward to manage both our environment, our lifestyle and how we can survive one cancer or another. In your mother's situation, I mean, I don't know the details of that, but what is certainly for sure too in this awareness that we're building of cancer is that it's not one disease. I think that we're more understanding of that than we were 15 years ago. Ovarian cancer and pancreatic cancer are two different kinds of cancers.
Right.
Breast cancer and leukemia are two different kinds of cancers. There's not one cancer. Finding a vaccine for polio or this year's flu vaccine, we're looking at a common kind of one disease or one pathogen. Whereas in cancer, it's not only different kinds, depending upon what its origin is, but every cancer is different in every person. Because every cancer starts with that individual's DNA and in a cell of that individual. And you started this conversation, Jeremy, by posing the question, where did I come from? And in that split second that you said that, I was going to say, well, I came from a unique sperm and egg from my mother and father. That's where all of us come from. We all start as that unique bonding of those two cells, and that's why when our bodies are completely formed of the trillions of cells that make us adult human beings, that they are not the same 75 trillion cells that existed when I was 18 years old, but they're a different set every 10 years. They replace themselves. The cells get worn out, they die, and then they replace themselves. And it's in that process of our cells growing and dying that we continue to live our lives and heal and get better and have injuries and survive. And it's when a cell in our body that does not die and wants to continue to grow and grow and grow and not perform in that normal, natural way of reproducing itself and then living a normal life and then dying when it's old and tired and being replaced by a new cell, that's when cancer happens. When a cell in every whichever individual it is in. In other words, I can't catch your cancer. I can catch your cold, but I can't catch your cancer. It will be my cancer that I catch. Because it
so basically, when the cell wants to work against the natural flow.
Right. Yeah. So I think we understand these things about cancer a little bit better. It helps us reduce the alarm factor a bit when we hear those three little words. But then, so I will get back to my story just a little bit and talk about, since the real reason I am able to have this conversation with you today is that what I realized in my own recovery process is that after I did go through all of my treatments, that I gained a little different perspective on how I treated my body, even though I was quite healthy before being diagnosed with cancer. I saw my vulnerabilities that, hey, look, even as a, athletic, strong, healthy person, I can get cancer. So what I set upon was finding every tool possible to keep from having a recurrence of that particular cancer, and then maintaining myself as a lowest risk, cancer risk environment in my body as possible. In other words, to do everything possible, not just in what I eat. I couldn't have really changed much about my diet because I was already eating quite healthy. But what was I doing physically changed quite a bit. And that is in where I began to work with with a yoga practice in a much different manner, and found it far more. Well, first of all, in recovering from my cancer treatments, it was able to give me my range of motion and my strength and stamina back. It also gave me a way to avoid times when I was feeling fatigued. And certainly the meditative aspects of any yoga practice helped me find a sense of center and well-being. But as I got stronger, I started using the yoga in a more systematic way of using the poses and understanding the mechanics of yoga in a detoxifying approach to keeping my body unpolluted from the natural ways in which we put toxins into our body that are almost unavoidable, in both in terms of the air we breathe, the food that we eat, however, pure, organic, or vegan, or whatever one might be, we are still exposed to these kinds of things. And so I looked at yoga in a sort of a scientific approach to see, well, what are the mechanics here that seem to be functioning in a detoxifying way. Certainly the yogis talk about it, but no one really ever explained it to me in scientific terms of how the poses actually work on our organs, to what is called in some forms of yoga is the squeeze and soak method of detoxifying organs. It also, in looking at the more of the science behind yoga, I started looking at this breathing that we do, and how that was working on the body, and why breathing was so important to the yogis. And then I started cross-referencing that to what does someone who's been through cancer or wants to avoid cancer need to understand about breathing. And discovered that, this goes back to, in order to avoid a recurrence of cancer and in order to detoxify our body, we need to keep our lymphatic system flowing. That's how we get rid of toxins in our body, is through the lymph system. It's designed to work that way. And so how does that lymph system work? And looking at it on a physiological basis, what it looked like, how it functioned, and understanding that there are certain things about it that are different from, say, the cardiovascular system. The lymph system is a system of little tiny canals through which the lymph fluid flows, and the lymph fluid carries with it toxins that we want to get out of our body, but also what are called, and some people refer to this as immune cells, but actually what they are is they're called lymphocytes. And they have the potential of actually identifying a cancerous cell in the body and attaching themselves to that cancerous cell and sort of neutralize it so it can then be fleshed out. So, in other words, we have this kind of automatic system of protecting ourselves from cancer. We have an automatic system in our body already, and we need to keep that system working and functioning. And it includes keeping the lymph fluid in our body constantly flowing. And that's one of the areas in terms of the science of yoga comes in. The lymph fluid flows in one direction, and it flows with the aid of how we move our body with muscles and bones. It also moves with the assistance of our breath. When we breathe, the diaphragm helps that lymphatic system actually move lymph, pump lymph through and out of the body. So seeing the mechanics of how this worked in a concrete way started then making me understand a little bit better how yoga was working, and I began to then use it more rigorously in my own daily life, and talking about it with my students, who then also became quite interested and fascinated with the fact that they could actually be moving lymph with deep diaphragmatic breathing, which we do in yoga frequently. So movement in itself, movement of muscles and bones, movement of the diaphragm, which is how we breathe, while we bring oxygen into our lungs. And then another very, very important way that yoga works to help us become less cancer risk prone, to keep our environment more cancer-free, is what's called in yoga inversions. When you turn yourself upside down, when you actually use gravity to invert that lymphatic system, you're assisting in it flowing through the body with those particular physics principles that we use in a yoga practice. So this is what I write about in my book, and I show ways and means of doing this that a survivor can do at any point in their recovery process, while they're in treatments, when they've completed treatments, or even if they choose not to have treatments. But certainly if one has survived the Western model of treatment and lives as long and as old as I am, then we need to keep our body healthy and cancer-free on all sorts of fronts. So I'm going to take a sip of tea here and let you ask me another question.
Well, I just find it really fascinating, because when you think about what you're talking about, especially with breath and the poses, I never thought about the inversion, and that's really fascinating. But I was told a long time ago by a friend of mine that I just asked basically what cancer was, and they just basically gave me a very simple answer: cancerous cells not communicating with each other. And it was, I guess that was basically a very fifth grade way of saying it to me, but it seems like with the breathing and the poses and everything else that you're doing, that the flow of whatever goes on in your body, blood flow, detoxifying, everything else, they all work in conjunction with each other to help you with the Western model or with whatever model you're doing, to let the body's natural way of healing itself heal itself. And I found it very fascinating, actually. So I imagine that yoga would help with more than just cancer, too. It would help with heart disease and other health concerns as well.
Well, absolutely. I mean, I'm a major enthusiast around yoga for everything. I would consider it the real fountain of youth, if you want to know the truth. I think that when I look at my friends my age, I'm almost 71 years old, and, when I look at my contemporaries who don't do yoga, they don't look healthy. And that's partly because when you get older, your cells get tired. And I'll go back to that question, where am I from, once again, those two little cells that came together, my mother's egg and my father's sperm. And from then, what happened was those two cells duplicated themselves and then duplicated again and again and again until, I grew into, as all of us do. And your friend who you asked the question, what is cancer, it's a half-correct question, a half-correct answer. But to really understand cancer, one must understand how normal, healthy cells work. So it goes right back to that first one that formed me or you or whatever. And every healthy cell in the body duplicates itself, maintains itself, meaning that it has a certain life span expectancy, doing what it's supposed to do. In other words, the cells of my kidney and the cells of my brain have different functions. So every cell in my brain has to be able to reproduce itself. And then those two cells do the function of my brain. And then at some point, in understanding how the cells of our body work, at some point it's built into the DNA of a healthy cell to die. And that dead cell is then flushed out of the body. It's already reproduced itself, so there is a nice, fresh, healthy cell there forming the functions of my brain. So if we understand that process of life, give birth, maintain and do your job, and then die. What is a cancer cell is a cell that duplicates itself, acts like a normal brain cell, but never dies. It keeps on duplicating and duplicating and duplicating. So this is in where we see the difference. It's not so much that the cells don't talk to each other. It's that those individual cells don't follow the rules of the game. And so that's what a cancer is. So on the other side of what you were saying is, the job I have is to keep all the healthy cells of my body as healthy as I possibly can. We want a healthy environment, then we keep what we've got healthy. We maintain it healthy. And in order to stay healthy, I need proper nutrition, I need all of the things that a healthy cell needs in a body. And I also, just as I keep my environment clean, when it gets polluted, I clean it. So I need to keep my body not only flushed with the right nutrition, but I also need to keep it flushed of dead cells and toxins. And so that's in where whatever disease one is trying to avoid or deal with, the mechanics of yoga can be helpful. And I'm going to take another sip of tea here, Jeremy.
So it's like not in resistance to the natural flow. You're working with the natural flow. And it's interesting because we fight so hard to not die, and then we miss the opportunity of living. Because you find a lot of people trying in resistance to their trying to eat healthy, they're trying to do all this, and all that things. That's fine too. We exercise and we think that we're extending our life, which I'm sure that we want to be healthy. Exactly what you're saying. Let's maintain and be healthy for what we have right now. All the cells that are healthy right now, I want to keep them as healthy as possible. But if our mind is constantly focused on, prevention of, being sick, I guess, or dying, I guess that would be a different
prevention
way
of death rather than a prevention of what? Of a way to not, enjoy the moment that we have. We hear a lot of live in the moment kind of advice, which is really good advice. But we know that our bodies are not going to last forever. And just as you buy a brand new car with all the bells and whistles, and then it can practically talk to you and tell you where to go, but you want to keep it as new as possible. And the way we keep the car looking as new as possible is by keeping the cells replenished in every way as possible. And I think that that's one of the things that yoga helps us do. It keeps our cells flushed, and it keeps our mind thinking in ways that are more preventative than avoidance. I don't even know what the difference between those two words are, but
I know what you mean. That's what I find interesting in what you're talking about is I find not just in cancer or health, I find that a lot of the world is in an avoidance of something that they don't want to experience, or I guess that's kind of the way. And then prevention, to me, would be a lot more proactive as opposed to the other way. Seems to get to be very reactive to circumstance, I guess is the way to put it. I mean, maybe that doesn't make a lot of sense. It just seems like you're going to a more holistic approach of being more proactive as opposed to being reactive to the situation. So.
Right, and there's another part of this that's really important in terms of keeping of the maintenance part of all of this, of keeping the machine as new as possible, and that is continuity. The American Cancer Society is just so supportive, and it's blasts all over, eat right and exercise. And, those are your most important tools of avoiding cancer, of maintaining. So, yeah, we know what this is not to talk about food. That's a whole other topic. But exercise is what they proselytize. And exercise becomes a rather broad, sweeping term. And we all know it. Everybody knows it. Even people who hate to exercise know that they're supposed to. It becomes this burden type of thing where they know they're supposed to do it, but they just, and even those of us who love to exercise, it becomes this mandate. I haven't done it today. I haven't done it. I've got to do it. So what I'm going to say is that the thing I love about yoga is, unlike putting on your sneakers and going out and going for a run, jogging, or going to the gym, packing up your gym bag and getting on one of those machines as a form of exercise, yoga is a form of exercise that you can do anytime, anywhere, in a group, by yourself. It doesn't cost a lot of money. It also can be done at any level. You can do, and this is what, in my book, I give various practices that can be done at a gentle 30 minutes or even 15 minutes. Or it could be done more ambitiously for 60 minutes. You pick your own program. You design your own pace, your own practice. And that's what I love about yoga. You can do as little or as much of it as you're feeling like that day. What exercise psychology has shown us, as much as we have been beaten over the head that you must exercise, it's the best way for whether it's diabetes or heart disease or whatever kind of disease you're avoiding. If you don't have a good experience you don't go back to it. So it doesn't matter if you tried. It's getting there and doing something every day, whether it is 15 minutes of very mindful breathing exercises or 60 minutes of doing, a full yoga practice, including modified sun salutations, twistings, which are detoxifying, and pranayama, which is a breathing exercise, and modified inversions, which is so stimulating to the lymphatic and the cardiovascular system. And then, of course, there are various things that we can do which stimulate what we call the relaxation response, which soothes the nervous system. So a yoga practice can be created to address all the kinds of physical needs that and all the kinds of systems that make up our immune system. We want to detoxify the lymph system, we want to stimulate the cardiovascular system, and we certainly want to give the nervous system a chance to rest and restore. So that's why I think that yoga as a form of exercise would, and certainly the American Cancer Society includes yoga as part of that. Would the world think of yoga as a form of exercise rather than packing the gym bag and going to the gym? I think people would find it that they could stay with it longer and reap the benefits because it is adaptive and you don't need to pay gym fees. You can do it at home alone, or you can go to a wonderful yoga class with a trained yoga teacher who will be attentive to the kinds of things that someone going through cancer will need.
Wow.
Which brings me to the other part of my journey, which is that the book is one way I have put out the information that I have collected about Yoga4Cancer to those who are going through cancer or wanting to avoid going through cancer. But for the past 10 years, I have also been teaching yoga to cancer patients and survivors, and also have been teaching how to teach yoga to other yoga teachers. And that is a really important part of my project and my journey, is to help. And we've talked a lot about cancer here and what cancer is and isn't, and how we need to keep our bodies healthy and strong. The world of yoga in the past 15 years has also changed significantly. 15 years ago, yoga was also not talked about a lot. It certainly didn't make the news very much. And if it did, it was only in very small circles, and it might have only made it into the news based on perhaps something more sensationalistic than it would be from something that is a very beautiful technique for healing and staying healthy and strong. So in the past 15 years, we've seen a plethora of different kinds of yoga, just lots and lots of people being exposed to the word yoga, and it still has a meaning that is that all yoga is the same, and that it means only one thing. And just like cancer, where there's not just one disease, it's a different for everybody, there are many different kinds of yoga. And yoga has also become sort of affiliated with the idea of it being quasi-religious. I think in the past 15 years we've seen the emerging of many different yoga styles. It's even offered in our local gym, sometimes in our local community center, our senior center, And, just saying yoga, everybody kind of thinks it's the same thing. It is not. There are many different kinds. And there are many different teachers. And those teachers had all be trained in a completely different style. And the one thing we should really be careful about when it comes to someone as a yoga patient and survivor is not thinking that all yoga is good for you and all yoga is the same. And I have had people come to me who believe this, all right, that here they are, touched by cancer, and everyone is telling them that they should go take a yoga class, that would help them manage their stress, help them feel stronger, and find that sense of well-being that in a yoga class. So great. I'm looking for anything to avoid a recurrence and to feel better in my body post-cancer. So they go to the local gym, sign up for a yoga class, and perhaps have a yoga teacher that knows absolutely nothing about cancer and begins to teach a yoga class that may not quite fit the bill. Could be one that is too strenuous for them, or not even aware of the fact that this person is a cancer patient or even a survivor, and that the vulnerabilities one brings to a yoga mat, having been through standard Western treatments, are significant and should be understood and recognized by yoga teachers. So that is my other mantra and mission, is to educate yoga teachers into not what I get asked most frequently, what should I do for someone who's been touched by cancer? Rarely, and I have a whole lot of things to tell them of what one should do when they have been touched by cancer, because I have a whole book there on the things that I recommend for someone to do. But rarely the question comes up, what shouldn't I do? What might be risky for someone who has been through cancer treatments? And those are the things that I'm very interested in all yoga teachers understanding those, being aware of them, and sensitized to them if someone who has been through cancer treatments or is undergoing Eastern or Western treatments, what they should be aware of. One of those in particular things that they should be aware of is the effects that treatment, Western or Eastern treatments, have on the density of bone. We lose bone density through treatments, and also become more vulnerable to weakened bones when we have cancer. And so there are certain kinds of things that are sort of common to a lot of yoga practitioners, which should be done with lots of care. And the one that I am most adamant about is a forward bend. A forward bend, it can actually put, if it's not done supported, can be very risky to the vertebrae of the spine. So that's one thing that should be done with extreme care.
To some of the poses, if you didn't pay attention with the loss of bone density, you could probably even hurt yourself. If you didn't take care of understanding. Yeah. That's interesting. And
cause pain. If someone has, say, liver cancer, and you are doing a deep forward bend, that actually can put pressure on the liver, and even if there is pancreatic cancer or any kind of abdominal cancers, the occurrence of that causing pain is quite common. If someone has had abdominal surgeries to remove parts of the colon, the uterus, stomach, you're left with a tremendous amount of scar tissue in the abdomen, and that's another way in which a deep forward bend. And by the way, I take the word deep out of the language that I use when I'm teaching yoga, or certainly out of the language that I suggest other yoga teachers use. We want to not give that instruction. We want to encourage people to do things at their pace and in their range of comfort, rather than prescribing something being deep. That's something that is just a caution when approaching a body that has cancer in it or is recovering from it.
Oh. That makes sense. So you're really it makes sense that there's several different types of yoga, and a yoga instructor, because the yoga instructor at the gym is going to be thinking about exercise and toning, and they're not going to be thinking about cancer. And so they don't have the training to specialize in that, in a sense. I mean, they could, but they're not going to know all the symptoms or where that patient is at. An example of that is that personally, I have 3 bulging discs in my neck, and I just went through all the treatment through a doctor, and I had asked him if he was thinking of yoga or Pilates to help strengthen my core, and to help prevent future problems, because I really don't want to do surgery. And he had mentioned I needed to find a yoga instructor that was skilled in that or knew about the spine.
Good for him.
And injuries. He said otherwise. He said don't do yoga.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. Yeah, absolutely. And there is a field of yoga therapy where yoga is done as a therapeutic model. But yes, yoga teachers should have some training, and there are those that do have that training. There's also some books I would recommend to you too, Jeremy. Specifically on that kind of thing that I'm here to talk about in my book. In any case, but yes. So back to one of the points that I was making when we talked about cancer is that more people survive cancer than die of cancer. So what this means in the world is that if we have 1.5 million people diagnosed with cancer every year, close to that, I'm using broad sweeping numbers here, let's say 500,000 die of cancer, another 1 million does not. So every year we are putting another 1 million cancer survivors in the world and not taking 1 million away. We're putting another 1 million survivors in the world, which means that all of those people going to the gym with their gym bags and seeing a yoga class are going to there's that many more people to go to the gym yoga class. And what I want to see is that those gym yoga teachers have taken my training along with the trainings that they have to become yoga teachers, but they supplement it with the training program that I offer, which is a 45-hour, partially online and then partially hands-on training to teach them about cancer, what it is, what the treatments are, what the side effects are, and the ways that they can use yoga to bring the benefits of yoga to those who might have these long-term side effects from treatments or also may just be dealing with these things in their body. But more importantly, to understand that certain kinds of things that we do in yoga are very preventative, that keep the cells of our body healthy and strong and keep it in a less risky cancer environment. And to talk about that in a yoga class, not just that they would be toning the body, creating core strength, but there are concrete ways that are explained in my book, and also we go into it in depth in my training programs of how one can keep their human body at a lower risk of cancer, whether you've been touched by it or not, using yoga.
Absolutely. Well, I just want to, before we go on, we've got a few minutes left, I just want to bring this up, that your website is, I believe, y4c.com, so
correct.
yoga4cancer.com. And
yes,
so,
and the 4 is the numeral 4, y4c.com, yeah.
And then those that are listening, by the way, down in the archives, that are listening, it's actually down in the description of the show, so you'll find a hyperlink there as well. But I believe you can find, if I remember right, looking at the website, they can find links to purchase the book and learn more about you as well. So, maybe we got another minute or so. I just wanted to maybe have you talk about anything that we didn't cover that you would like to just let the listeners hear about before we end the show.
Well, I would think that what I'm most excited about is that as I go forward teaching my own classes and also teaching other yoga teachers, I'm finding that there is so much interest in this, way beyond my expectations. I didn't start down this path when I heard those 3 little words thinking that I would be teaching other yoga teachers how to teach cancer patients and survivors. But as the world goes forward in understanding more how we are living with cancer, not just surviving it, but living it, and as we learn more and more about the ways that we can heal ourselves, that yoga is one of the most important tools, whatever disease one is dealing with, and even more so in terms of cancer. I'm going to give a pitch here to, if you don't mind, I don't know if this is appropriate or not, but there is a PBS series going to be broadcast on the Emperor of All Maladies, What is Cancer? And I think that I would love for people to tune into that, and as we all learn more about what cancer is, maybe someday we will have a program about the queen of all healing, which would be yoga. And so I would...
Well, I am very happy that you came on the show, and it was very informative, and I'm sure that we'll be in contact and have you on the show later at another time
Good.
As well. So I'm excited about your work, and if you're ever down in Tampa, Florida, please let me know.
Thanks for the invitation. I will do that. Okay,
there's a great vegan restaurant. You're welcome.
Great vegan restaurant.
All right.
Okay.
Thanks, Tari.
Thank you
everybody,
very much,
thanks for
Jeremy.
listening.
Okay.
All right. And have a blessed day.
Yes, thank you so much.
And thank you, everybody, for listening. Our next show will be on next Saturday at noon. We have Dr. P.M.A. Chatwater coming on, and so that should be a great show as well. So everybody have a wonderful, blessed week, and peace be with everybody. Thank you.